We got to go to Knoxville. We're talking Tennessee football. We do mood trackers. I keep a running file in my Google Drive here of all the major programs that we talk about the most. And there's a running mood tracker. And at any given point in the year, I can go back and I can see what I thought the collective mood was, the temperature, if you will, of the fan base. Sometimes it's really fun. Other times it's kind of sad. But most times it shows you the volatility and the fickle nature of what perception versus reality is. Think about Tennessee's 2019 season. You remember how it started, of course, but I want to talk about how it ended too. This was a program that looked like not only was it going to go completely off the rails last year, it looked like there possibly was going to be an overthrow of a coaching staff in like week 3 or week 4. If you don't remember, this is a team, the Tennessee Volunteers, that lost to Georgia State at home in week 1. They lost to Brigham Young in week 2. That was a week famously where BYU would not ship me a t-shirt. Thought they had some really good designs, and they wouldn't ship me a t-shirt because I wasn't going to the game. So that's a grudge that I still hold. They beat UT Chad in week 3, so they won the in-state rivalry. And then week 4, they get crushed by Florida on the scoreboard. I think the game and score necessarily lined up. Nevertheless, they went into their first bye week. They were 1-3. Rumors abound in Knoxville that there could be a situation wherein Jeremy Pruitt is let go because he's lost the locker room, lost the program. Of all people, Phil Fulmer could Barry Alvarez his way down the stairs and onto the sideline and serve as an interim head coach. I didn't necessarily know if that was going to happen. I didn't know which rumors to believe because I had, to be honest with you guys, I had some people that I've come to trust at Tennessee. When I would ask them, with a little smiley face or laughing emoji, they'd text me back and say, I wouldn't be so quick to laugh. I'm not so sure there's not some validity here. Let me silence my phone from a friend who should know I'm on the air right now. And so I say all that to say, they got to a point coming out of that bye week where they had to play Alabama and Georgia, but they got to a point where you start in week 6, and if I could take the front of their schedule and I could put it behind the end of their schedule last year, once they got rolling, it felt like they were playing 9-3 level football. They finished the year 6-0, I think 5-0, 6-0 with the bowl game, something like that. But, the way they were playing at the end of the year obviously did not warrant being a product and a team that would have lost to Georgia State or BYU. So they probably played 9-3 level ball at the end. After the bowl game, because of the ending to last year, you enter spring. I would say the overall mood tracker right now that we're going to have on Tennessee is one of two extremes, cautious optimism. Because every statement that I have heard come out of a Tennessee fan or a Tennessee insider's mouth, there's this sprinkling of optimism. They give you something to run with. And then there's J.J. Peterson, he's talented, but you got to do it this year. Hadn't shown us anything so far. I mean, Jared Garantano, Brian Maurer, neither of whom do I view, nor do you apparently view, to be the answer. But then you got Harrison Bailey. And might Harrison Bailey, even as a true freshman, be able to wow enough and be able to perceptionally pull even with, or maybe slightly ahead of those guys enough to where, all right, if I'm Jeremy Pruitt, I'm willing to pull the trigger there. Hopeful, though. That's what everyone is. They're hopeful in these coaching changes and locking down a top 10 recruiting class. I'm going to talk about that in a second. A lot of people are hopeful that a lot of things they're seeing are not fooling their eyes. That end to the season last year, hopefully it's a surge. I think momentum is one of the most overused terms season to season in college football. But hey, if it does exist, hopefully there's a carryover momentum last year to this year. Survived Indiana in the bowl game. Locked down a top 10 recruiting class. Again, I'm going to circle back to that in a second and what it could mean. But you're hopeful in a lot of areas. I don't necessarily think there's a reason not to be. There was a lot of coaching turnover on this staff in the offseason. Now, here's where I hit the pause button a little bit. I saw it just like you did. There are two schools of thought on the Tennessee coaching turnover, just like there are two schools of thought with how Georgia's offense is going to play out this year. A lot of folks see Jeremy Pruitt sort of burning the underbrush here and clearing things out so that you can have necessary growth in the program. And maybe he had guys on his staff to get off the ground that collectively as a staff weren't capable of cruising past a certain altitude. And so now you got to drop some sandbags, and then you got to add, and then hopefully you can fly a little bit higher. But then the skeptic comes in and says, okay, Well, there's something to be said for continuity. Guys like Nick Saban notwithstanding, what he's done is the exception to the rule. Normally, you want some continuity, like maybe Dabo and Clemson have. And what if, behind closed doors, Jeremy Pruitt just can't keep a staff together because a lot of guys haven't bought into his vision? I don't think that's the case. I think Jeremy Pruitt believes he upgraded his coaching staff here. That remains to be seen. But here's why the ending to 2019 was so important. I didn't necessarily care because the teams they were beating, they should have beaten. So I didn't necessarily care about the results in and of themselves. What I was looking for Tennessee the whole season last year, and what I think they ultimately got because of the way they finished on the recruiting trail, is they just needed to be able to package a vision. If you were watching this show when I was doing it independently last year, that's all I talked about. Don't care about the win-loss record for Tennessee. Granted, I don't want you to go 3-9, and it looked for a second like that was possible, if not probable. They end up 7-5 regular season. I didn't care about 6-6, 7-5, 8-4. What I cared about is, can Jeremy Pruitt package a vision? What I mean by that is, you got to understand the difference. If you're in your mid-30s or older, 40s, 50s, I'm in my mid-30s. You guys may be around there. You may be older than that. For those of you who are older than your mid-30s, you've seen Tennessee play for SEC championships. You've seen them be a perennial top 10 team. You have seen Tennessee football win a national championship. If you're a junior in high school, the last time Tennessee beat Alabama, you were barely able to walk. So the Tennessee you remember, those kids don't remember. And those kids are the ones that you're recruiting. So what Tennessee needed to be able to do is package a vision. They can't settle for second best. If you're going to beat Georgia, you got to beat Georgia with kids they wanted, kids that could start at Georgia. That's normally the way that's got to happen unless you pull some kind of freak +4 turnover kind of day like South Carolina did this past year. To compare to Georgia as a program, you got to have comparable athletes, and that's hard. I would say it's easier said than done. It's not even easy to say. It's hard. It's especially hard when you can't go out into those living rooms and reasonably sell a kid on the idea that it's possible to play for an SEC championship here. Well, no, it's not. I've never seen you do it. Like, how in the world are you trying to sell me on that? Well, then all of a sudden you get a little juice at the end of the year, and then as opposed to walking in after 4-8 and my job's on the line, I walk in and we finished, at least I could convince you that we finished as one of the hottest teams in the country, and here's what I sell you on now. We played Alabama pretty hard last year. A year before, we played Georgia pretty hard. We can't beat them right now, but we can't beat them because we don't have the players. You are one of those players. So what I'm telling you is, forget about the past for a second. Look at the arrow, this orange arrow pointing up, and then consider what you could add to it. I need players like you. I am accumulating players like you. We're going to win with or without you, but I need you on board. If you end last season the way you did, and then you go out on the trail and you pitch that, here's what happens. What happens is, I'm sitting on the stage behind this camera you're looking at. It's National Signing Day, and we're doing our National Signing Day show, and Barton Simmons and I are up here, and Steve Wiltfong's over here at the desk that I'm sitting at, and all of a sudden, Colin and Aaron from the control room come in our ear and say, hey, we got breaking news here, and then Trey Scott comes in here and says, hey, during a commercial break, Tennessee, they just landed this guy and that guy, and they've cracked the top 10. And we don't even have a graphic ready for it because no one anticipated it. We didn't even have one of the pre-made graphics ready for Tennessee finishing top 10, but yet they did. Make no mistake, the finish to last season was enough, probably, in the minds of enough kids to push them into that top 10 category. Now, there's still a sizable gap between the class Tennessee brought in and the class Georgia brought in, Alabama brought in, but at least it's closing. At least for 1 year it was closing. So now we look towards 2020. Extremely cautious optimism. That's the pre-spring mood tracker for Tennessee. Here's one other important thing. They played a nightmarish schedule last year, and it's not easy this year. They go to Oklahoma. They got to play Florida. They got to play Alabama. They got to play at Georgia. The important thing to note, at least from what we can tell right now, is it's very unlikely they will ever have back-to-back weeks in 2020 where they play top 20 teams. So I always respected Tennessee fans' patience. I used to harp on this pretty heavily on the previous version of this program. I always respected how even after they were sort of like in battered animal syndrome, after the Dooley experiment, the Kiffin experiment, and Butch Jones comes in and he asks for time so we can do a complete overhaul here, and you guys gave him time. And whereas you enter territory where it looked briefly like there was a spark, and that walk-off win against Georgia, we were right there standing in the end zone for that one. Ultimately, it doesn't work out, and then it's time to burn it all down, and it's time to start over again, and you get zero, I mean zero, return on your emotional investment. The last thing in the world you want to do is sit there on your computer or sit there on your phone or sit there in a press conference room and listen to a guy take the stage and say, we're going to win here, but I'm going to need patience, and we're going to need time. That's what worried me the most about Pruitt last year. I didn't necessarily know if Tennessee fans were in any kind of mental space to give another coaching staff time, especially when they start off losing to Georgia State and BYU. Well, at least for now, you have. So selfishly, I really hope it pays off, because I'll be honest with you, I was in the office the other day, and I was talking to one of our guys here. I was looking at web traffic for LSU. And LSU had a huge year last year, and understandably, their web traffic just exploded. The numbers look like typos. That's how crazy it is. And I was thinking, just from our perspective, like, what team could be that next team? Which team is a massive fan base that is just dying to break through? Now, LSU, relatively speaking, was not in any kind of wilderness like Tennessee has been, but if Tennessee popped off a season all of a sudden where they were back in contention for the SEC East, it would be pretty incredible, I think, for everyone, from our IT department, our web traffic, to just you guys. Not even worried about any of that stuff, just watching the resurgence in Tennessee, in Knoxville. That would be fun to watch. Selfishly, I hope it happens, because I would love to see, again, selfishly, I know you guys in Athens can tune out right now, I'd love to see as cannibalistic an environment exist in the SEC East as exists in the SEC West right now. Talking to Colin before the show, the schedule is a lot more evenly divided this year. You don't have all the big games pushed towards the end. And so a couple of more big-time players in the East would go a long way towards further solidifying the SEC picture and essentially being a minor professional league.